Welcome to today's Title IX Committee meeting. We will go ahead and get started with the review and approval of the minutes. So I'll provide a couple minutes for everyone to review the minutes from the last Title IX Committee meeting. All right, so if there are no objections to the minutes, we'll go ahead and approve those as is. Looks like there are none. All right, so we'll continue moving forward. Next part of the agenda is the update. So I'll let Mr. Bollier have the floor quickly.
Thank you, Director Lewis. This won't take long, but I did want to let the committee know a couple things. First, this will be my last Title IX committee meeting as a member of this committee. I, of course, will still attend as often as I possibly can. But, you know, I feel like I have come to a place, we have all come to a place as a committee where the work can continue. I did want to take a brief moment, though, and, you know, I know we did some of this during the look back, but I really wanted to thank every single person. You know, Ms. Cohen, you've been with us from the very beginning. Ms. Varnum, Ms. Jackson, I can't thank you guys enough for the work that you have put into this. Ms. Stagner, Ms. Hoots, Mr. McCarty, and so many people who weren't here at the start. Thank you all. This committee was established almost 2 years ago, and the work that it's done, I think, has put this district not only in a drastically different place, but it's positioned us as a leader in the state and frankly in the country on this issue. We are one of the best school districts, in my opinion, when it comes to this, because of the work that all of us sitting around this table have done. Ms. Crable, you were there as well. Please pass on my thanks to Ms. Johnson. I'm proud of every single thing that we have accomplished. I know we've asked a lot of everybody, but I just want to say thank you, let you know from the bottom of my heart that this is probably the thing, when I look back at my 4 years on the board, that I will be most proud of. You know, hiring Dr. Faust, of course, and right behind that was this committee and hiring Mr. Lewis, because we needed you here, sir. You've done an amazing job, and I know that this committee and you will continue to do a great job moving forward. So that's my update. Thank you all, and let's have a good meeting.
Well, thank you, Nelson. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to serve as the Title IX coordinator for the district and your work as part of the committee here. Moving forward, I did want to have a moment to introduce new members to the committee. One of those new members is Ms. Joelle Newman. She is replacing Jane Emma as the lead teacher for health and PE. So I'll mute myself to allow you, sorry to put you on the spot, Ms. Newman, to allow you to just have a brief introduction and say hi.
Hi, I'm very excited to be on this committee. I played softball at UNCW in college on a scholarship, so I was on a Title IX committee there. I've worked in several schools, Williston, Carolina Beach, Wrightsville Beach, Bellamy, Alderman, CREC, across the county, elementary, middle, and high school. And I look forward to being part of this team. And I'm also a parent of 3 wonderful kids that 2 of them I've already went through the New Hanover County school system. They are 19 and 20, and then I also have a junior at Hoggard. So 1 more left in the system. But love New Hanover County, very passionate about all areas of health and definitely physical activity.
Well, thank you for being a part, Ms. Newman. And I anticipate your role in being able to help with the programming that New Hanover County Schools has already been doing in this area. So we're definitely thankful to have you as part of the team here. Moving forward with Title IX updates and introductions, I was going to introduce our investigator, Mr. John Henry. He was not at the last Title IX committee meeting either, but he came on board early to mid-November. However, he's actually currently doing the work of a Title IX investigator at a school. So he planned to be at this meeting, but duty called. So he's out actually doing his role as an investigator, which comes first. So hopefully at the next meeting in February, we'll be able to have a chance for him to be on and introduce himself. And the last person that I wanted to introduce is semi-new, not new to the committee. She's done a lot of work for the committee, but she's in a new role now, Miss Stephanie Craybill. So I'll allow her to take the floor if she has anything she wants to say in her new role from committee member to a board member.
Well, thank you, Jarrell. I'm looking forward to continuing the work and representing the school board as a liaison to make sure that we get information back and forth, from the committee, from the school system, out into the public arena where it needs to be. And just wanted to thank Nelson, for his leadership on the committee so far, and any of the other new board members as we're all trying to learn about what this means. Everybody has their own preconceived notions of what Title IX is, and I think this committee has done a great job of really kind of pulling that together on what it is and what it is not, and collectively together we will show what it can be. So I'm looking forward to a good 2021 and on and to the future and beyond, says Buzz. So thank you, Jarrell.
Thank you. And so continuing on with the agenda here, I did want to move on with a couple more updates. And so I will share my screen for this update, Kim. So give me one brief moment. So I've been working with communications to do a number of different things regarding messaging and impact to the district regarding branding. And so I do have a logo that Caress and I and communication staff put together. And I did want to show that to the broader committee here. So give me one moment to get that shared. So this is the logo for the Title IX committee. Caress and myself worked really diligently to get a logo that brands the Title IX office within New Hanover County Schools, and also is encompassing of what the work of Title IX involves. So we definitely looked at different pieces, different designs, and I think this accurately articulates and sets us apart for what we're trying to do here. So this is our logo for the Title IX committee and Title IX work here in the district. So anytime you see this logo here, that it is referencing Title IX, of course. And so when it talks about the know your rights aspect, those rights that we're referring to are really the rights to be free from sexual discrimination within the district, including sexual harassment and gender discrimination. So that is our logo there. I wanted to update that really quickly. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a brief moment. So as I was saying, we have been working with, the Title IX office has been working with communications to get branding and messaging out to students. We've had a lot of new recently, new logo, as well as new procedures and policies. And so we're working with communications and also a new website as well, Title IX website. So we're really working to get that messaging and that branding out, working on social media. There should be a pretty big push this week from the communications department regarding Title IX messaging, particularly to students. We have some videos and a lot of different things that we're just trying to get the word out about what Title IX is from the student perspective and continue to go from there. So continuing on the Title IX updates, I will allow Kristen Jackson to have the floor really briefly. I'm going to share your screen, Kristen. I'll share my screen, Kristen, regarding that SEL programming information. So hold on one moment as I share my screen here.
Hi, everyone. If you're new, I'm Kristen Jackson. I'm the Director of Student Support Services. Today, I'm going to share with you some of the safety programming that we've done. So we often refer to this as SEL programming. However, what we're about to share is mostly things that we're teaching students that is really for their safety when it comes to bullying and harassment. So I wanted to go ahead and share those. I think Jarrell's working on that. But as you know, we have implemented 3 different programs with community partners in our school. The first one that we started, that you can see right here, is Shifting Boundaries. That actually started a few years ago and expanded to all 6th grade students last year. So you can see that since last year, we've served approximately 3,000 6th graders in the Shifting Boundaries program, which is a 4-session program. Next, we are now starting, and we have the instructors on here, bringing in the bystander in our health and PE course. This one, again, is a little more involved, talking about sexual harassment and violence. Therefore, we have contracted with Coastal Horizons to have 2 of their very well-trained staff from the Rape Crisis Center and the Domestic Violence Shelter to actually go into these classrooms and do the 5 90-minute lessons with the students. And that actually starts next week. I don't think they started this week. I think it starts next week, but you guys correct me if I'm wrong. The other one that we worked on was Safer, Smarter Kids. We have that for K-5, and we have that everything purchased. The problem we're having with Safer, Smarter Kids, again, is COVID. And starting this with students when we're not in a setting to support them if they want to see an adult. So we really are waiting till we come back to school to actually do this program with the elementary students, just to make sure that we're there to support them in case, one of them discloses. We want them to be in a safe setting. The next, and we can thank Tanya Jordan from Student Support, our lead social worker and counselor, and she worked closely with the Carousel Center to start this, the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children training, which is a 2-hour training, and we have pretty much successfully trained all staff and are working on new staff. So we have trained 3,348 staff members so far. So that we were able to do a combination of some people online and some people in person, but we were able to get that done, especially during COVID. So that includes bus drivers and everyone. We've had cafeteria staff, bus drivers, custodians, and we are working with HR on getting that into the substitute training. And also, of course, as new staff is hired, that's in their new staff training. And the last thing we have is mental health first aid, which we had a huge kickoff plan for this year, but again, COVID. And we have been able to do one training. The good thing about mental health first aid is they have changed it to an partly online program. which has allowed us now to have our teachers have access to that because Trillium was not doing the face-to-face training, but they are now. We had one session last week and we have them scheduled for March and the end of the school year, and next year we will continue with that. And our goal there is to get all, I have that, there's a mistake on there, I'll fix that, to have all people trained on that. So you can see that I have a mistake on the bottom one. Somehow I doubled up the second one. So I will fix that. And I think that's all. Any other questions about that? Okay, Amanda, who is one of our trainers, said that she's excited to be currently scheduling high schools for bringing in the bystander program. They have 3 high schools and the first session is 125. Okay, and Amanda's on here somewhere. There she is. Hey, Amanda.
Kristen, I just wanted to thank you for your efforts and all the folks that have, in the counties, at schools that have done that. And I have been lucky enough to be part of some of these trainings just by being at the school as a substitute when it's happening. So these are really excellent programs, and I'm really looking forward to working with Tanya to bring this out to some of our PTAs. Through the PTA Council, because that is one of the reasons I got on the committee. Well, I was appointed to the committee in the first place. But I think that the more parents understand what their kids are hearing, the better off we are. So, but thank you so much, because these are all excellent programs.
Yes, thank you, Kristen, for your work on that in that area. So moving forward with the agenda, it is time for the Title IX survey discussion. There are a couple points that I want to discuss before we got to this part on the agenda. So let's first review the role of the Title IX Committee. So the role of the Title IX Committee is to make a recommendation to the board. So the committee, what we do is we do that groundwork, and we work to provide the best solutions for the board to review and for the board to make the determination of what happens next. So that is our role as committee members and the Title IX Committee here. So I just wanted to briefly share that as a reminder of what we're asked and tasked to do. And that's just that's outside of the survey as well. That's any work that the committee is doing. So moving forward with the survey, I did want to remind everyone that I know that there are some individuals, I believe, that aren't necessarily members of the Title IX Committee. So I did want to remind everyone, because we're in this COVID time, that individuals that are non-members that are here today are in a role, observing type of role, so that they don't have the ability to speak. We're in this new format for COVID, for Zoom, but as if we were in the Board of Education Center, non-participating members, definitely observe, and I encourage you to do so. But the speaking and opinion role is reserved for the members that are Title IX Committee members, and you know who you are in that regard. The last point I'd say before we open discussion about the survey is that today, my role as a Title IX Committee chair will be to simply to take the notes, and if there are comments or questions or things like that about the survey, I will take note of those things to be able to provide those answers at the next committee meeting. The next Title IX Committee meeting is scheduled for February 15th, 2021. So I just want to lay that foundation, that groundwork before we open the discussion of the survey. Do we have any questions so far? Okay, so if not, the way this will work is that I will mute myself, and I will allow individuals to unmute themselves if they have comments and questions about the survey.
Jerome, could you talk just briefly about how this survey came to be?
Yes, so the survey was actually in existence well before I was hired. So I was hired in September 2019, and the Title IX Resources Subcommittee was at work putting this together, the background, as early as June 2019. So that Title IX Subcommittee, Resources Subcommittee, did a lot of the groundwork at the beginning to get the questions and the first draft out. Once I got hired, that's when I put together the first draft with the work of the resources subcommittee with Amy Cease and other partners. And from there, we've worked on different questions as a committee, as a whole, and this is where we are today. So yeah, in a snapshot, that's where we are. But this came from the work of the resources subcommittee of the Title IX committee. And I saw Dr. White, I saw your hand really briefly. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think following up on Nelson, I'm trying to recreate the timeline in my mind because of COVID and all sorts of things. I've sort of lost track of what happened when. And as a member of the resource committee, I know we worked on putting together drafts of the survey. And I just went back through my notes to look at the drafts that we had. And then I looked at the final version, and there's some mismatches there. And I'm not quite sure what happened, but it's probably been, I'm not sure that the resources committee even has even had a meeting since our last face-to-face meeting. Feels like back a gazillion years ago. So I'm just not sure how we got from the original drafts that we were working on and discussing and the draft that is the most recent one that's been sent out. So I'm just, maybe I missed something, maybe I've forgotten something because so much time has gone by, but I don't feel comfortable with this final draft because it doesn't look like what I remember a lot that we had discussed on the resource committee.
Okay, thank you, Dr. White. So as I stated, I'm making notes on comments and questions here.
So, and again, as I said at the meeting, I have no idea. I wasn't on the resources committee. I didn't know about, the details or the makeup of the original survey that Ms. White worked on. I'm wondering maybe if it wouldn't be good to, again, I firmly believe that part of the survey needs to be about climate. And we've put in so many new policies. I wonder if it's not a better idea to go back to the drawing board with this. And again, I'll be stepping off. This is a decision for the entire committee, but maybe look at this from scratch. Look at some other surveys from other districts. And I know Director Lewis has done that, but I'm wondering if maybe that wouldn't be a prudent approach given the discrepancy.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in and comment on that as well. I was not on the resource committee. I was on the education committee. So basically, my collective memory is not as detailed as yours, Becky, because I wasn't in on the creation of the surveys. I remember reading them. I remember giving some input, to the surveys. I don't really remember how we finalized, what we have. So I wouldn't be opposed to just, have another look-see, as an action item, given the fact that we haven't sent it out and we're still kind of trying to figure out where we are, as far as the pandemic kind of stuff goes. So that's my collective memory is I'm not quite certain. I couldn't be one to say it's different because I don't know that to be true.
I see a comment from Mr. Bollier. Was everyone able to hear that comment from Stephanie, Ms. Crable? No. Ms. Crable, can you repeat that one more time? A couple members were able to hear you, but a couple weren't. Can you repeat that? See if your audio's working.
I think it's muffled by your mask. If you could just get really close to the microphone.
Get closer to it, I guess. Yeah.
Can I take my mask off since it's just me sitting right here? I'll put it on in case anybody gets upset. So what I wanted to say was that I was not on the resource committee. I was on the education committee. So most of my focus was working with Kristen and her team on what we were actually putting out there into the community that was not the survey. So all I remember is hearing us talking about the survey and having the opportunity to give input on questions. But I really, and this is probably bad on my part, I don't remember all the iterations of the survey. So, but I would not be opposed to us, going back and taking a look at it again, since we are at, kind of like a turning point right now. we have some new members, and where we are with the pandemic, it looks like school at some points stabilize and get out there. So I wouldn't be opposed to going back and revisiting it, having Carolyn's team revisit it, and then we make a more conscious effort to pay attention to the question.
I also was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I also was not a part of the resource committee, but as in recent events with the last board member, I've been contacted by more people than I can count, upset about the proposed survey. And I think it's really important with that in mind that we move fairly quickly on this if we can. I think everybody feels like this survey is way overdue, so I hate to see us go completely back to start. My understanding is the main thing that people are upset with is the omission of anything about sexual harassment. So I think if we can just take one small step back, look for a way to get that into the survey and move forward as expeditiously as we possibly can, because I think this is a very hot button issue and we need to get this in the field as soon as possible.
Ms. Varnum?
Hi, I was on the that subcommittee, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I can remember everybody else that might have been on there. Maybe, yeah. Anyway, if you were on there, feel free to jump in. There were definitely multiple discussions about kind of transitioning from one type of survey to another, and based on my recollection, just as one member of that group, and I know Amy Feith joined, it was really kind of leading that subcommittee for the majority of the time. And originally, the original 5 questions were really focused on really trying to gain some insight into whether students understood how to report, whether if they had a situation, whether it was harassment, sexual harassment, bullying, discrimination, if they had reported it, if they experienced some type of incident and didn't report it, giving some more information into that, and really kind of focusing that way. And then I don't know that I can really capture the entire transition, but at some point in time, it was also really imperative to the group from a mental health perspective, a psychological debriefing perspective, to gauge the school climate around Title IX concerns, knowledge, and incidents. And so from the early versions of the survey to the later versions of the survey, they're really capturing completely different information. One is really more about what do students, parents, and former students and parents also understand, and where's the comfort level on reporting, and what might be barriers to reporting or to seeking support. And I think that was really one of our main focuses. And then kind of the evolution of it became a little bit more contextual in school climate and very much related to the discussions we were having around the EYES project, our National School Climate Project with the majority of our middle schools, where it was really about engaging or empowering youth and engaging schools. And the surveys that had been done as a part of that work, addressing a broad scope of concerns around discrimination, bullying, harassment of all different kinds. And so, again, I don't know that I can articulate how it moved from, a survey that really asked for, have you shared information with us? If you had an incident, would you share, or what would be reasons why or why not? And then really more about climate. But I think that they are two very different requests and asks of any responders. The other thing that's really critical for us, and I'm sure, and I know Dr. White has talked about this before. We talked about it in our subcommittee, but it's really important when creating the survey questions that we're prepared to respond to them. We don't want to capture responses or feedback and then not have a response. And so all of that discussion was based on intentionality in the results are going to come in. Now, what are we going to do about those results? What do they give us? Do they give us an opportunity to respond to incidents? And do they give us an opportunity to prevent and create more awareness? So on the whole, I am concerned with maybe asking an anonymous question of, have you had have you been the victim of either harassment, discrimination, bullying, or sexual harassment, and then not really having an opportunity to respond to that. So I think that alone needs to have a way for us to know more information about that so that we can respond or find out the barriers in that non-response.
So thank you for that, Ms. Barnum, because I was going to mention the problem with saying to students that this is going to be anonymous. My understanding is we can't guarantee anonymity. I think the most we might be able to say is the district isn't going to try to track this down, but we should not sell this. In fact, we cannot sell this to our students and our families as an anonymous survey. That's my understanding. And I don't know if Ms. Dagner might speak to that a little bit, but that's my understanding.
And I know and I was looking to see if Dawn Brinson was on. She was also in our subcommittee, and that was there was some discussion about our ability to maintain the confidentiality while we won't track IP addresses or any connections. There may be some limitation to ensuring that data remains extremely secure. Does anybody else from the subcommittee recall that?
Yeah, we did have a lot of those sorts of discussions, and a couple things I want to say. First of all, when we talk about climate, the climate actually consists of a variety of things that you're talking about, and part of it is what you were saying, Julie. We need to know that our students and parents, and actually the faculty and the staff, all understand the policies and procedures and how to report, and not only that, to have confidence that the system actually works. Because if they don't have the confidence, you mentioned barriers. We really need to understand where are the arenas that are problematic, because no matter how good the policies and procedures are, if people don't know them and they don't trust them, they're not going to work. So that's one part of it. But another huge important part of the climate is actually knowing the extent of the problem, which does mean facing head on, asking the questions of the students, what has happened to you? And if you ask about, have you been bullied or harassed, and you don't talk about sexual harassment in particular, the students aren't going to understand what we're talking about. And when we get the data back, we won't know what they meant. And so it'll be very difficult to implement policies and procedures. And as a matter of fact, what I've done in the last few days is reached out to some of my colleagues across the country who are doing this kind of work. And there seems to be widespread agreement that when you ask students these questions on an anonymous survey, the students are willing to answer them, that we do want to take every effort we can to ensure that their responses are anonymous. And the nature of the questions are not of sufficient detail that anybody's going to be able to follow up on a specific case. The detail's not there. But if we don't have a good understanding of how pervasive the problem is, it's going to be really hard to come up with policies and procedures that address what's actually going on. If there's a lot of cyberbullying going on and not a lot of other stuff, then you focus on the cyberbullying. So we really have got to take that big, hard leap and find out what our students are experiencing. It also sends the message, I think, to the students and parents that we actually care. But I think, like Julie said too, we also have to make sure that once we know the nature of the problem, how pervasive it is, are there particular types of problems that are more prevalent than others, that we have things in place to address the needs of the students. Because if a student says, gosh, even anonymously, I told them something happened to me and now there's nothing to help, then that's going to undermine the trust and confidence. So there are two integral things, and I actually think that the draft of the survey that we've seen is not that far from being tweaked. I don't think we have to go back to the drawing board and start over. I think this can be done fairly quickly because I do have a sense that the community is very anxious to see this. They've been asking for it for 2 years now. So I don't think we have to go back to scratch, but I do think that the current version of the survey can be tweaked to get at both the climate questions as well as determine the extent of the problem. It also gives us an incredibly good baseline, because as policies and procedures become better known, become implemented, then the survey can be periodically repeated and you'll be able to say, oh, we're finding increases in reporting. We're finding increases in student-parent confidence. So this baseline survey is really important, but it's only the beginning. And it does, I think, can and should happen quickly.
So to that end, a little bit, Julie, I feel like you're like going to be seeing up my nostrils if I have my mask off, and all my double chins. But to that end, are we prepared for what we might get? So do you think that this is something that our committee should, I don't want to know, like spitball for a lack of a better word, what are some of the things that we might expect so that we can start putting together, what a response plan might look like? I'm kind of one of those kind of people. I don't know if you guys have read, The Art of Racing in the Rain, but the driver says, your car goes where your eyes go. So, should we not kind of be looking ahead and anticipating some things? And even if we don't anticipate it, let's just think of what anything could be and just have like a little spreadsheet ready to roll or investigate further. I mean, is that something that sounds good?
Before you speak really quickly, Julie, I do want to provide a response from the Title IX office and central office under our policies and procedures that were put in place in August 2020. So if let's say we put out a survey and we did get information back related to potential complainants or reports of some type of sexual misconduct. So the response would depend on what type of information we got back. So let's say specific individuals specified who they were and the type of conduct that they had happened to them. Then that would be enough information for the Title IX office to then follow up with that particular person. And under our new policies and procedures, we essentially offer them the opportunity to file a Title IX complaint. If they do file a Title IX complaint, then what happens is that we begin the investigation process. If the individual that has been named or whatnot is still within our control as a district. So let's say on the opposite, we get a response that's anonymous, doesn't name a particular person, then the district is still on notice of maybe potential Title IX sexual harassment incident, and we would still be obligated to respond. But our response would be severely impacted and limited in what we can do because we're not going to be able to go through that sexual harassment Title IX process of investigating and things like that. And in that case, the response would be more so providing support measures and support services, if not at an individual level. If we get a certain number of responses about it, maybe something's happened at a particular school, or maybe a particular person has been named or something like that. And then that really guides what the response would be. For example, at Roland Grice Middle School, Kristen Jackson, Tanya Jordan, and a number of other persons, we went there to do a day's worth of assemblies for their school due to a particular incident. And we also had a parent support night, essentially. And that's an example of a response that's appropriate, but isn't necessarily individualized, but it's impacting the whole entire community. In that example was Roland Grice. So it really depends. The response depends on what information we get back. But any response we get essentially does put the district on notice to respond, but the response depends on how much information we get. from the Title IX office. So it definitely starts with law enforcement first. We get information that is criminal, then we take it to law enforcement, allow them to do their role. If we get other information back that's not criminal, but we're still on notice as a district, then we have to respond under our new Title IX policies, which gives a lot of deference to the person that's been impacted to kind of lead the way. And we look at additional support measures through student support services, or maybe HR, whatnot, depending on who has been impacted.
I'm sorry, I want to say something. I can't take myself off of or put my video on right now. I have some things on my head that are not. But I feel like I'm hearing two different things right now. One of them is that this would be anonymous and that students could share what has happened to them, and just for the sake of understanding like the depth of the situation or the climate that we have. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that they can use this as a way to report, because if we're talking about responding, how are we going to have a student potentially disclose on this survey and not have a response? So I guess I'm just confused as to which one you are saying is going to happen here, because I get what you're saying, Jarrell, is what the protocol would be. But if we're giving this as a totally anonymous survey, then we aren't giving students the option of whether they even want help or not. So this is, as victim service providers and as mandatory reporters, I don't know if I agree with these questions being on a anonymous survey.
So Jarrell, did you want me to step in and kind of respond to that and answer the the question that Ms. Craybill had to start with? Yeah.
Right, and so you can
Okay.
step in.
Okay, I'll be quick because I know a lot of people want to speak. So I think and thank you, Jenna, and the others. I think this is an important clarification. For one, the survey is really developed to help us gauge any kind of trends or patterns in kind of the scope of the problem, like the depth of the problem on the whole, and really kind of to determine overall needs, a little bit of a higher view. Reporting is very different, and and the survey wouldn't be how we would encourage students to report if there's been an incident, and how they would receive support that way. That's really more of a gauge. The reporting systems that we have, of course, students can go to the student support staff in their building, their school counselor, their school social worker, maybe a school psychologist, a school-based mental health professional, or anybody else they feel comfortable with. And then all of our staff, as Kristen Jackson was sharing, have been trained in darkness to light and really have a better understanding of mandatory reporting and signs and symptoms or characteristics, and then what to do with disclosures. The other thing is, if a student isn't comfortable and they need an anonymous way to report, we have a couple of options for students. They can use the Say Something app, which is completely anonymous, but they can provide any information they want to in that if they want a direct response. And if they don't want a direct response, it still gives a way for us to communicate with them, because in the Say Something app, we can still communicate with whoever reported. And it's anonymous, and we don't have any idea who it is. And that same option exists within Ethics 360. So our students could go on and still remain anonymous and make a complaint in Ethics 360, and we would still have an opportunity to communicate with them through the system and and it's still anonymous. We don't know who they are. We only know what they disclose. So looking at these two as, they really do capture different information. And I don't know if Dr. White wants to jump in and kind of add into that, but, we want to make sure that we don't give the impression that this survey is a means of reporting individual concerns. It's a means of gauging how well our students and our overall school family understand reporting and what barriers the overall population sees, because it's going to give us trends. It's not going to give us individualized information that we need to have to respond to like unique and individual incidents.
I will just interject really briefly. I know there are a couple of other people who have points. At the beginning of these discussions, they go back, well, like we said, 2 years ago. When these survey discussions first began, we did not have Ethics 360. It didn't exist. Neither did Say Something. And so I think maybe that's where part of the discussion about anonymous came from. But now we do have those tools within the district for individuals to report um, sexual harassment, those type of pieces, if they choose to. But when these discussions first began, we didn't have Ethics 360 and we didn't have Say Something. So I'm not sure if that changes everyone's understanding, but I just wanted to make that point really quickly.
And one thing I would add to follow up on what Julie said, that the survey is anonymous, but it would be very appropriate and responsible for us to include on the survey. If there's anything in this survey that you would like to talk about further, you can, and then list the resources on the survey so that any student at that very moment knows exactly what they could do if an issue comes up. And again, it communicates, we have resources, there are people here for you. It allows us to ask the questions in an anonymous fashion, but gives individual students an option for finding help if they need it.
And I just want to add, I think that's especially important because so many of our students, especially at the high school level, are remote only. So we're talking about providing supports where we don't have eyes on kids all the time, which is really a difficult situation for us to be in. So making sure that as we give this survey that we let them know, even if you're remote and we haven't seen you all year, or some kids have never even met their teachers because they came in middle school and never had an open house, but you still need to know how to report these and feel safe reporting that to us.
And also completely agree. And thank you both for adding that in. Also, I think we have to continue to be reminded that if we use the survey, we can't guarantee it's anonymous. And so making sure that we put that, we have some absolutely anonymous resources that are completely vetted and designed for us or whoever else not to be able to track. And those would be the Say Something and the Ethics 360. Yeah, thank you.
May I add something, if I may? Both to you and Ms. White, I think it's imperative, having spent almost half of my life in the high school arena. If we're going to ask the questions, fine. But I think it's vitally important that we give every student, irregardless of from whence they come, an opportunity of who they should, and I heard that, but I want to make sure I heard it correctly, that if you feel like you should talk to A, and then A can decide where they go from there, or something similar. But I think they need to have A and immediate contact, because some of these will be serious.
Right. One of the things that that I've found in years of doing this research, and of course most of the research is done with college students because we don't have to worry about parental consent and that sort of thing, is that students' reactions to these surveys, rather than being upset by being asked the question, it's like, oh, finally somebody is acknowledging the reality of what happened to me. But I totally agree with you that we always need to provide students with a 24/7 option, especially if they're doing this remotely and they're sitting in their pajamas at 2 o'clock in the morning doing the survey. There needs to be a hotline phone number that's available to them 24/7 if they need immediate assistance. And so in addition to all these other reporting options, I totally agree that that's the ethically responsible thing to do. And I certainly wouldn't endorse a survey that didn't include that opportunity.
I still have questions, especially when it comes to mandatory reporting. If somebody is using this survey and these are minors, so if they disclose sexual abuse of any kind on this survey, then that's not reporting. That's something that we have to respond to. So I get that we're giving them options, but it's not an option if they're a minor and they report those things on this survey.
Yes, to your point, Ms. Young, anytime someone makes a report about something, essentially you can't promise any confidentiality or anonymity when it comes to dealing with minors in these incidents of sexual misconduct. So that is something for the committee to be aware of. We will have to respond um, in some way with law enforcement, particularly, and following our Title IX policies and procedures.
Mr. Lewis, you've been doing this for years and years and years, and I just want your professional opinion. As an expert, would you recommend for or against putting that specific question to a group of students?
Well, that answer, it really depends on what the goal of the survey is. Mr. Boyer, unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that 100% yes or no. It really depends on the goal of the committee as a whole. It depends. I can't say yes or no 100% either way. It really depends. I think there's more discussion and more background work for the committee to do.
I can add one thing. I have, again, been talking to some of my colleagues that are doing this work, and the people who are doing surveys in the schools and are asking questions about sexual assault have been able to fall back to the same way in which school systems deal with responses on the youth behavior risk survey. That the questions are vague. The student can say I was sexually assaulted, but there's not a lot of detail. So you can't really track down who did what to whom when. And they've been able to not be bound by the mandatory reporting things because the students are answering the survey anonymously. You're not making efforts to find out who the individual is. And because the purpose of the survey is to, as Julie was saying, get a gauge of how severe the problems, or which specific problems are happening in the system, that mandatory reporting element there is just not there. So that's, anyway, that seems to be the sense of what's happening in other districts across the country, because this question is obviously not unique to us at all.
I think I have, I guess, two comments. I think it will be important, first of all, to make sure students are aware that in participating in this survey that they are not reporting, because it could be easily confused by a student to think that they are making a report when they complete the survey. So that needs to be clarified with the students. Additionally, I think that when a student gives this information, the support, of course, is given. But in counseling, we start off counseling sessions by educating students on our limits to confidentiality and explaining to them when we have to breach our confidentiality to get them additional supports. So that would be another good introductory way of being able to make students aware of how this survey information may be used.
Are there any other hands or comments about the discussion here? So I think that's a good point, Ms. Jordan. If there was a disclaimer or more information letting students know how the information might be used, I think that would be very helpful. So I've definitely taken note of that for picking up on our next Title IX committee meeting. Are there any other comments or hands that I missed about this discussion today?
So do we have any sort of way forward at this point? I mean, we've brought up a lot of issues. I think we need a path.
Along those lines, is it possible for the resource committee that developed the survey in the first place to have, this is a really large group to try to hash out a lot of these details. Maybe the subgroup that's been working on this should have another meeting to hash out some of the details.
I think that's a good idea, Dr. White. So what we'll do is we'll present it back to the resources subcommittee to take these comments and notes into consideration and provide some type of insight about next steps and go from there. I don't think individuals were able to hear you. Can you repeat that, Ms. Grable? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me? Well, you can hear me because you're right there. All right, so we suggesting that the resource committee gets together and puts together something and is ready to discuss at the February 15th meeting, or are you suggesting we do that? I mean, you guys get together, obviously, but when would you report back?
So the question was for individuals that weren't able to hear. When we provide it back to the resources subcommittee, would we provide it back with them and have them report back to the broader committee prior to the next scheduled Title IX committee meeting, which is on the 15th? Or would we wait for the Title IX committee, resources subcommittee, their feedback at the meeting on the 15th? That's your question? Okay, so that was a question. I understand that individuals want to move pretty quickly. I wouldn't be opposed in having information provided back to the resource subcommittee with some type of input prior to and for consideration at the February 15th Title IX committee meeting. I'm not opposed to that. Any objections in that area? It looks like there's none. So that'll be it. We'll have the Title IX resources subcommittee review the work and provide some input prior to the 15th of February. Any other last points of discussion on this particular topic?
Mr. Lewis, if I
Yes.
could just make a quick recommendation, I think that there needs to be a member. I know right now Ms. Crable wasn't on the resources subcommittee, neither was I, but I do think either Ms. Crable or some other board member whoever gets appointed to this committee needs to be a part of that resource committee discussion.
Okay, I'm not in disagreement with that. I will allow the board to determine who they select to be a part of that subcommittee.
Well, Ms. Crable, would you be interested in doing that since you've been serving on the committee for so long as is? I mean, that would make it easier. You're muted.
Yeah.
Technically difficult. I'll relay her message.
Yeah, tell them that I.
Okay, so Ms. Crable said that she would definitely serve as part of that resources subcommittee, and I'll provide her a list of participants on that subcommittee to get together and do the work that we've talked about today. All right. So that is going to wrap the discussion of the Title IX survey. If everyone's okay with that today, we'll have the subcommittee provide more information, and you'll hear back about this prior to the 15th of February. So that was a pretty in-depth discussion. We do have one more piece to talk about today. At our last Title IX committee meeting, we talked about athletic compliance, but I think it's best if we just table that discussion and parking lot it for the next Title IX committee meeting. So at this point, we'll just go ahead and wrap this one up. You did have something else, Ms. Crable? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll give you a second to try that.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so when I was looking at I don't have a problem with tabling the athletic presentation, with that, especially to give, maybe Joelle a little bit of a chance to, as a health and PE person, even though they're not really kind of related, but they sort of are related. But the other thing I wanted to just talk about was to throw out on our table is for when we're talking about next steps. In our meeting notes in November, we talked about perhaps adding middle school and high school students to this committee. And I'm not certain that we necessarily need to add them to the committee, but I am certainly open to discussion. But having focus groups with them, with middle school and high school people, perhaps using, Tanya or Kristen or our school counselors or whoever might, but we would need to kind of figure out what we want to be asked, or or to do, or expectations. But I think that's a great idea. We want to not lose that thought. And then the second thing was I wanted to start thinking in our mind how any of our next steps might fit in the strategic plan. Because Dr. Faust is getting ready to pull the board and his staff together to develop a new strategic plan. Our current one is in effect until June, and I don't want us to lose any momentum, but I also want to make sure that this is captured in a way that we are forced, to keep looking at it and stay on track. Not that we wouldn't, but if it's in a strategic plan, it's going to get done. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay, so it sounds like some individuals are having trouble hearing, so I'll do my best to yes. So I'll do my best to relay that message. So Ms. Craybill talked about revisiting the idea back in the November minutes. We talked about adding members to the committee, particularly middle school and high school students. Ms. Craybill was stating that she is unsure if it is the best practice to add middle and high school students to the actual committee, but does believe maybe that would be best served as having a focus group that the committee could engage to get student input and understanding about where they are. So that was point number one. Point number two, I was talking about in June, the review of the district's strategic plan will happen, or is in the process of happening.
It should be done.
It will be done by then, I'm sorry. So by June, the district will have an updated strategic plan. And Ms. Craybill wants us to reflect as individual members about our roles in the committee itself and how that can be utilized to fit the work of the new strategic plan of the district that will be in place in June. That's point number two.
Yeah, to make sure that we have a clear tracking mechanism. This is a
right, and so that will having that done will allow us to make sure that we are in step and tracking along with the district as a whole, and keeping our work focused on what we're doing here as a Title IX committee. Has everyone understand those points?
Yes, and I just want to add to Ms. Craybill that we do have established a Save Promise Club in each school, which is Students Against Violence Everywhere in middle and high. So that you could use some of those resources to gain student perspective.
Okay, well, like I stated earlier, the next meeting is February 15th, 2021. So we canceled the December meeting because of the holiday, and we moved the January meeting up 1 week due to the Martin Luther King holiday. So the February 15th meeting is back on schedule with the third Monday of each month. So we'll be back in line and continue from there. So if there aren't any other points of discussion, thank you all for being a part of the discussion today, the Title IX committee meeting. If they don't have any other comments, we'll go ahead and adjourn for today.
Would that meeting be at 3 as well?
Yes, they are all at 3 and they are all open to the public.
Emails about times for this one.
Yeah, yes, I'm not sure what happened there, but the Title IX committee has a standing meeting third Monday of each month from 3 to 4:30.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I definitely appreciate your participation. Have a great afternoon.
Hey, Terrell, stay on. I got to brief you up on something.
Okay.